Representatives Adam Holmes and Roy Klopfenstein. Thank you so much for joining me on Message from the House. I just got done telling you both that I think this is the fourth episode or fourth group of interviewees we've had. Top four's pretty good.
I'll take that.
It's a privilege. It's great.
The privilege is all mine. House Bill 15, we just kind of talked before this. I heard about it first in January. I'm sure that the, concept for energy reform came to fruition, well before that. How do you go about crafting such a large piece of legislation and then to see it go to both chambers already? We're still in April, I guess May now. So talk me through kind of this process for House Bill 15.
Well, I think part of it, or a lot of it, is timing. And certainly when we look at where we are as far as the energy sector as a whole, and the buzzwords now are data centers and AI and cryptocurrency, yes, that's part of the equation. The rest of the equation is we've come through a time frame or a time period when baseload generation has been vilified. And when I say baseload generation, that's coal, which all of us grew up on being blessed by coal, by having our light switch works, nuclear, and in some cases gas and oil. It's all somewhat been vilified, and it's unfortunate because baseload generation is what not only keeps Ohio a great place to live, but it keeps United States of America as a first world country. And folks that know me or hear me speak, the difference from a first world to a second world country to a third world country most often is energy. And certainly there's a government style and factor, but you can't overplay the importance of energy. So part of the timing of this bill is we have huge energy consuming things coming online. And it was time to reform Ohio, and Ohio wants to be a leader. And I view the overall view of this bill as if we do it right, and we think we have done it right with our colleagues in the Senate and our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, it will create an atmosphere, create a place where baseload, they want to come to Ohio. They want to be built in Ohio. That's good for all Ohioans. Quite frankly, it's good for all the Midwest. But it will set Ohio up, and I really believe this, that this legislation will open the door for industry coming back to Ohio, industry growing in Ohio. We will have more jobs than we have people, and it's almost, you could say, a quality of life issue. And you can't have a good quality of life if you have rolling blackouts, rolling brownouts, anything of that sort. You have to have, and Chairman Holmes alluded to this when we first started the Energy Committee, affordable, reliable, and dependable energy. If you don't have that, if you're asked to shut your air conditioner off in the afternoon, none of us want that. And quite frankly, the way our system is set up now, and because of the lack of base load, we have factories that are paid to shut down at the moment to lower the peak load demand. That's inefficiency. Yes, it keeps our grid live, and maybe thanks to our utility programs, distribution networks, but without that, we would have already had rolling blackouts and brownouts. So we want enough power produced here in Ohio that possibility is not a possibility. And we think this legislation opens that up. And Chairman Holmes' leadership and bringing it and shepherding it through the committee, it's been a pleasure to work with him, and exciting things coming.
Yeah. Well, it's been so great, so rewarding, right? I think a thing to mention, almost 2 years ago, recognizing the emergency that was impending for the United States on a shortage of energy. And Ohio's in the center of that, and the opportunities here, but we're so integral to the economy of the United States. So much manufacturing is done here, and our natural resources that exist inside our state. We were going to be a key member of the energy future. And so we had to get on this. So even 2 years ago, right, you and I were both anxious that we better get something going, and very fortunate that Speaker Huffman and the Senate president also recognized that same urgency. So like you said, the timing came where we had to get on it. And it's so urgent that we had to get on it and run really fast to get something signed now, because it's going to matter. The new plants that want to be constructed in this area, they were waiting for this bill to get signed so they can start submitting their approval process. It's really, I think Ohioans are more tied into global politics than they might imagine. It's really important what we're doing.
And Rep. Holmes, you had mentioned this had a lot of support from both chambers and both parties.
Right. We set up a mission statement because as the legislature, the House of Representatives, we represent every Ohioan, because every Ohioan uses electricity. So it's got to be a nonpartisan unity of effort. And beyond the parties, it's the geography of Ohio. The urban centers, the rural areas, everybody has to be taken care of. And so that's what it required, that kind of open, transparent communication, ensure we address the requirements of everybody. And that's been rewarding too, because I think we got it done.
Yeah, I would say so. It was very neat to watch the process, your aides and everybody else, the experts, and to learn about it all. I want to hear from you both again. I know, you've mentioned this several times in other spaces. How does this bill protect ratepayers?
Well, the first thing when you say ratepayers or customers, the first people want to go to is the amount of money they spend on energy. I don't believe that what they're paying would make a difference to a constituent if they don't have the power when they need it. So I think the most important part of this bill is availability of energy. We are setting the stage so we have availability. We can talk about rates after that or what the customers pay. We can somewhat project without enough base load, the scarcity of energy raises the cost. I would not expect this bill to lower the cost the day the governor signs it into practice or into law. I think it will slow down the rate of increase. Everything that goes into energy, whether it's building the free market production of electric, or whether it's addressing the cost of transmission and distribution wires from the EDUs, inflation has done a number on the cost of delivering the power to the people. What this does is make the availability of the production so that costs don't rise as quick. I think it would be a false pretense to tell our folks, you're going to see lower prices. I would love to be able to say that. I don't know that that's the case because there's so many things that goes into the price of electric. But certainly the rise in prices, the growth in prices should slow as we bring more base load online. So I think when we talk to ratepayers or customers, I don't think we can sell this on an expectation that their bill is going to go down by 10%. Yeah. I don't think, quite frankly, I don't think that will happen. But if the bills don't go up by 25% and instead go up 3, 4, 5%, the cost of, or the rate of inflation, it's a huge victory. And it is a supply and demand, and people do not want to be without supply in this case. One of the other things that was addressed in this bill and we talked about is the reliability factor. I live in an area where seldom do we ever see an outage. Our backup generator, the hours on it are from its routine runtime. We have a tremendous asset in our area for reliable power. That's not the case everywhere in Ohio, and this bill tries to address and does address that reliability factor, which is, when you talk about rates, it's more than rates. You've got to have the power there as much of the time as possible. This bill's that's part of the equation here.
And quickly, I'll never forget this. It was close to my last reporting day in Columbus, and there were it was 2022, and there were really bad storms and tornadoes, and it was really hot, and so generators were taken off the grid, or not generators, but, I'm not an expert. You guys are. Users are taken off, right?
Yes.
And so the spots that still had the capacity to produce energy, the grids were getting overloaded. And so they had to pick and choose in Columbus who they took off.
Right.
I was one of them. My apartment didn't lose power in the storms or the heat, but I was one that they took me off the grid, obviously not to overload the other pieces and parts. So I'll never forget that.
How long were you out of power?
2 days. Yeah, I lost all my food in my
See,
refrigerator.
think of that, right?
Yeah.
And that's an example with a
Perfect
storm.
example.
Oh yeah.
But
With a storm, it was a rare, and it was. I just remember it was so hot, so that was the even worst part. But yeah,
that's
storm.
one of those things that when you talk about price of a product, quite frankly, what would have you paid extra to have power that day?
Yeah, how much?
Yeah.
You would have paid more. So the reliability factor and the availability of power that we hope to increase here in this bill can't be understated.
Yeah.
It is huge. The other part of that equation, we're part of the overall PJM market, and PJM, probably with the local utilities, they have to manage the distribution and the power that gets sent out to folks. So the decision was made that day, who do we shut off to affect the least amount of people so the whole grid doesn't go down?
Correct. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the most, if you want to say productive or unproductive, you were the lucky winner.
Yeah.
But when we look at the whole grid, and I referenced earlier where we have programs in place, or electric companies have programs in place today, that factories shut down so the rest of the folks, and most often homeowners, don't lose power. That's significant. Most consumers, unless they work at that plant and they get the afternoon off, or they're managing the plant, they don't know about those programs. Some of us have that on a small scale where we have electric shutoffs on our hot water heaters, and that's the lower peak use. Wouldn't it be nice if Ohio had so much power being produced? Peak doesn't matter, yet it does, but we have enough power produced that we're shipping it out of Ohio. And it wasn't that many years ago that Ohio was an excess power producer. Unfortunately, we're not today.
And I'm pulling up my phone only because I wrote down a quote during the floor speech, and I wanted to ask the question, in what ways does this work to make Ohio energy independent?
Well, energy independent, if PJM manages the distribution of power and the generation of power. Ohio now today imports more power from outside Ohio than what we produce. Anytime you import, you're using more transmission line. The more transmission line you use, the more probability, statistically, you have of power going down. So producing the power here, you're using less of the transmission network, your reliability factor goes up. So it's just a win-win to have the power being produced here.
In Representative Holmes,
Yes.
transparency is also another focus of the bill. How do you feel it works to foster that between the utilities and the consumers?
The biggest one is, I think if we share information, everybody can benefit, and that's a great thing to say. This is not an anti-utility. There's going to be growth, and we're going to really rely on them to build a lot of distribution and transmission lines. One of the key components we added was something called a heat map, if you've heard of that before, and that's really is showing how much stress or how much usage there is on any specific piece of the transmission or distribution lines. We're going to make that a public information, because I do think that if we all know that, we can make better decisions on where to site electricity generation, because in certain places, if you for example put sites close to urban centers, it can get congested, and you cannot transmit all the power they're producing through the lines, like traffic jams, like interstates during rush hour. So proper distribution of the new energy development, we'll do that in a cooperative, collaborative way with utilities and the generating plants. Those kinds of ideas will prevail. It'll always be a better plan if everybody's involved in it and understands it.
And to piggyback off of that, this bill also works to keep the market competitive and
Right.
in turn, as Rep. Klopfenstein brought up, improve energy availability.
Right. Markets always increase quality, right, and decrease price. That's their nature, and we better get on that, and we'll get both. And like Rep. Klopfenstein said, we need to have reliable and resilient energy, and so the market will drive that. And we've taken historical examples from across the United States in regulated states where it wasn't a market-driven environment, and there were substantial impacts. Looking at you, California. So that's something lessons we learned to avoid.
And most of our consumers, they just pay their bill. But, we're a regulated monopoly after generation. Generation is free market. And I don't remember the number, but since 1999, when we went to that deregulated market, I believe it was 1999, on the production side, the Ohio consumer have saved millions of dollars. And this bill, I think, tends to enhance that and say, look, we're going to remove the barriers. We're going to change the paradigm of what the bureaucracy is to get that baseload generation happening. This bill does address those timelines. It does address the bureaucracy, and we're going to continue to look at that. It's quite frankly a partnership. It's a partnership between the generators. It's a partnership that includes the electric utility companies. Quite frankly, back to the heat maps, it includes the consumers and new businesses where they locate.
Right.
It's a capacity thing where we know in retail or in factories making parts, first to market wins typically. And the only way you can get first to market in many cases is you have to locate where there's available power. That's something that we think will help economic development and help people site plants that says, hey, they have the ability over on this grid for X amount of growth, where if we build at this location, we're 3 years out from getting that power to the site. So heat maps are critical. It's a component that is used in other states and has been used successfully. There's no reason why we can't use it here in Ohio and increase the quickness that we can come to market with new factories, new housing developments, and be more efficient.
And I think, that was even my next question of how it's connected to Ohio's economic development, right? I don't think we even think about that looking at an energy bill from the surface, but as you just broke down, it really does impact that.
Well, and the impact, I don't think we can measure it. And I said earlier, I really feel that if we get energy done right here in Ohio, our kids and grandkids are going to have incredible opportunities that we don't even know are coming yet. We hear all the talk about data centers. I actually think AI is a bigger growth area than data centers. Reliable power to run AI. That I don't know how to quantify what a difference that's going to make. In Ohio, we talk about we're within 40% of the population of the United States, within 8 hours of us. We're the perfect place to build. Right. We're the perfect place to develop. We're the perfect place for a host of other reasons outside of energy when we look at the things that make businesses want to come here. But you might say energy is the base load of making it happen. So,
is that a pun?
Yes, it was.
I appreciated that.
Thank you.
Yeah, jovial. That's great.
Bringing the energy.
Right.
I can't take credit for that. That was Kylan who threw that pun out to me. So thank you, Kylan. I also, I know we had jokingly said we didn't necessarily want to talk about the PUCO shot clock. I'll ask maybe as a trivia question for folks that might not know what that acronym stands for, if you want to take it away.
Well, we are a regulated monopoly. We are a deregulated production state. But everything that happens in the energy sector goes through the Power Siting Board or the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. So if we talk about a 3 or a 4-pronged approach between generation, transmission, distribution, and the customer, the other part of that equation is the bureaucracy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That's not what I meant there. The Power Siting Board has a purpose. The Public Utilities Commission has a purpose. And when they can do their job in an effective and efficient manner in a timeline which we can't have people waiting 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years for rate cases or for the permits to build. And the Public Utility Commission, their director, has been fantastic to work with on this bill. But that's something that is part of making things happen. And when that's inefficient, it slows everything down. So the shot clocks are part of that equation that we've somewhat challenged PUCO on saying, look, you're part of the answer to making Ohio number one, frankly, in everything. And we realize that they do great work. It's just we want it better. We're forcing the timelines there a little bit and says, hey, we want the work done quick enough that people, when they have a choice of building in Ohio or one of the surrounding states, they say, look, we want to locate in Ohio. And that shot clock is part of that equation.
Right, like a deadline. Yeah, accelerate our bureaucratic process. We got to go because if they have to wait around, they'll go to another state. So we want to really expedite this, and the demand's going up while we're hanging around. So yeah, let's get it approved and get it going. That's the idea.
Rep. Holmes, how consequential would it have been if House Bill 15 was not a concept or
If we
didn't
hadn't
pass as quickly as it had?
I think we would have missed a lot of opportunities, and we would have been way behind on responding to this increased demand that's coming as a state, and we would lose to other states, or the blackout that you endured would increase. And we think about that all the time of getting on it right there if there was no House Bill 15, and then we were spending money on energy, I believe, in ways we didn't have to. That was not the most efficient use of state money on our transmission and distribution and generation. So those two things for sure. I really had a sense of urgency on it that we were looking at a train wreck coming if we didn't act like right now. And fortunately, Roy and many others in the legislature saw that too. So yeah, I feel great.
I think one thing we haven't mentioned is national security.
Yeah.
And we're not going to put out names here, but we have other states making decisions on the energy front that are not good and not reliable. And it puts Ohio in a place that energy is part of our national security. And we're positioning Ohio to be a part of the solution, not a part of, there's some other states just making decisions that aren't good for us as a country.
Right.
And we're part of the solution. So I don't think we can underestimate, and it's something we really can't measure at this point. If the United States is going to lead the AI race, we have to have the power. If we look at it globally, we have a competitor in China that, depending upon who you believe, they're ahead of us in the AI race. We can't lose that. This is a national security issue too. And when you think House Bill 15 is part of that solution, part of winning that AI race, it brings a sense of urgency to us to get it done.
Were you distracted by our timekeeper, Ripple?
Right. She was,
Giving you the 4.
Okay.
We really, we really tackled a lot. We talked about consumers. We talked about market competitiveness. We talked about availability of energy. If you both want to conclude by saying, what are your hopes, maybe in a sentence or two, that House Bill 15 will do for the state of Ohio?
House Bill 15 sets the table for an extraordinary future for Ohio to return to the center of action for the United States, which means for the world. Ohio energy means the capacity to do work, and people work in this state. We manufactured so many things here. This idea of reshoring is, we can be the center of that once again. We're blessed with oil, natural gas, coal energy underneath our feet, and so having that together with the transportation networks and the industrial capacity, we're in it to win it. So that's what I want, and this is a catalyst for that kind of extraordinarily bright future.
I think the other thing that it sets the table in a new way,
Yeah.
and it sets the table in a new way where we don't place one sector over the other sector as far as importance. A baseload generation is critically important. The electric distribution utilities are critically important. PUCO and a power siting board are critically important. We're not here to pick winners and losers individually. We want to be a winner with all the sectors working together. We poke some sacred cows. We're not afraid to do that. We want the consumer to win in the end. And that's what this bill does. It lets the consumer win.
I think you guys would be the best head coach, assistant coach in the game. Rep Holmes, do you coach anything?
Everything.
I was about
Who's
to
the
say.
head coach and who's the...
I guess it depends what the environment is. If you want,
That's right.
a mellow head coach and a hype man assistant, you do that, or vice versa.
The best team, right? That's why.
I really think you guys are a great duo.
He's more photogenic, so he needs to be the
Yeah.
head coach.
Okay.
That's what I think, Roy. I think we're a good team.
Just 2 farmers helping Ohio's energy production one bill at a time. Thank you guys so much, Rep Klopfenstein and Stein and Rep Holmes. Thank you again. Quick social media shout out. You can follow us on Facebook, Ohio House GOP, Ohio House _GOP on Instagram. Subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
You're awesome, Lynn. Thank you.
I paid him to say that.